Hello, welcome to another edition of Geography Revision Rocks. Before I do that though, why do paper maps always lose at poker? Because they always fold. Okay, so obviously we're not here to tell jokes, are we? But behind me there's an image of a waterfall, and for our exams we need to know about waterfalls. But exactly what do we need to know about them, and how can we get most marks in the exam? Well, firstly, we need to know that waterfalls are a characteristic of the upper course. We also need to know where the plunge pool is, and we also need to know that they form a gorge of recession. So those are important key terms. So this question, we're talking about waterfalls. You notice that this question says, explain the formation of a gorge. Well, it's exactly the same as explaining how a waterfall is formed. The gorge is a bit that happens once the waterfall has happened. So the question like that, we have to do the process of the waterfall and the sequence of the waterfall before we explain that it can then create a gorge. You'll also notice in a question like this, it's just got lines to write your answer on. It doesn't ask for a diagram, but I think all questions that ask for a formation of something, you should draw some diagrams. You should be able to draw 3 simple diagrams, and by doing that, that shows that sequence. When I was talking about sequence and process, the sequence, the order things happen in, diagrams really help you to do that. Okay, so when we get a question like that, I said we need 3 simple diagrams, and I really do mean simple. Especially on a question like that, 4 marks. So 4 marks is 4 minutes. We can't be drawing something that will be able to be hung in the National Gallery. This is a really, really simple set of diagrams. So for my first diagram, I'd want to draw something which shows the more resistant rock on top of less resistant rock. That's the first thing in terms of a waterfall. We must have more resistant rock on top of less resistant rock. So more resistant rock is harder rock, but I think we should be calling it more resistant rock rather than just harder rock. And the less resistant rock is our softer rock. But again, I think it's good practice to use the terms more resistant and less resistant. So that first diagram is really simple. Alright, but then we must show what happens next. So what happens next is the less resistant rock, that's our softer rock, gets eroded by the power of the water. Now when we're answering a question like this, we could just say the less resistant rock gets eroded by the water. However, we want to make sure that we get maximum marks, so we must include a key term. So we would say the less resistant rock is eroded by hydraulic action. Those key terms, that key term, hydraulic action, allows us to access the higher marks. Our third diagram, we kind of almost jump a few sequences, but we only want 3 diagrams. So on this diagram, we would do some dotted lines. And those dotted lines show us where the waterfall used to be. And we need to put an arrow pointing back. So what happens now, the less resistant rock in our previous diagram showed that the more resistant rock was becoming undercut. Okay, undercut is when the erosion is undercutting that more resistant rock. And it becomes top heavy, till eventually it collapses into the plunge pool. The plunge pool being the area at the bottom. Once that happens, we then get a flat face of the waterfall again. But the process doesn't stop and it continues. And the less resistant rock will get eroded by hydraulic action because the process continues. And as that process continues, the more resistant rock will become undercut and it will collapse and the waterfall will retreat. So the key thing here is that the waterfall retreats. And once it does that, it leaves the sides. And that is where we get our gorge of recession. So that question where it says explain the formation of a gorge, you would do all these sequence the process in the formation of the waterfall, but we must mention at the end that the waterfall retreats to create that gorge. So I've just spoken for quite a long time then when I'm drawing those diagrams, and there's no way within that 4 minutes or even 6 minutes, there's no way you could write everything that I just said then. You would take probably 12 minutes, 15 minutes to do that, and that's too long on a question like that. However, in a moment I'm just going to put up an answer to that question, which could be used for 4 mark and actually could also be used for a 6 mark question. And it simplifies those sentences, but it doesn't simplify it so you don't get the marks. If you wrote something like this, then you'd get the marks. So you can see I've got my 3 simple diagrams, and Underneath, we can have our first sentence, all right, which is going to come up just now. So that's where it says, for a gorge to form, more resistant rock is found on top of less resistant rock. Really easy, links it to diagram 1. Then I would even put diagram 2 and a little, number it as diagram 2. A less resistant rock is eroded more easily by hydraulic action. Remember that key term. This undercuts the more resistant rock and creates a plunge pool. Dead easy. Then number 3, last diagram, because, and actually I'll just put it in, the reason I put the word because is the question is an explained question. It's always good to use that word in an explained question. More resistant rock is undercut, it becomes unsupported and collapses. The process continues and the waterfall repeats, creating a gorge of recession. Job done, maximum marks. Well, thank you very much for listening to another edition of Garage. Come in! Oh, hi Miss Shergold.
Hello, Mrs. Spencer.
Do you know, you knocking at the door has just reminded me of something. Knock knock.
Who's there?
Waterfall.
Waterfall who?
Waterfall you are for not loving geography. See you next time.